My stepfather walked me down the aisle, not my dad. My dad was at home, 3 provinces away, because he said the drive to Ottawa was too much for a weekend. He said that. Those exact words, too much for a weekend. He had driven 14 hours to Winnipeg the month before for my brother's hockey tournament, a regular season game. Not even playoffs. I'm not telling this story to make you feel sorry for me. I'm telling it because for a long time I thought I was the problem. I thought if I just tried harder, showed up more, asked for less, maybe they would finally look at me the way they looked at my brother. And I want other people who grew up feeling like the placeholder child to know that it is not in your head. It was never in your head. My name is Petra. I'm 31 years old. I live in Ottawa with my husband, and until about 4 months ago, I was still sending my parents $400 a month because they asked me to, and I didn't know how to say no to people who had always made me feel like I owed them something, just for existing. This is the story of how that changed. I grew up in Regina, Saskatchewan. Middle child. My brother Liam is 4 years older than me. My sister Brooke is 6 years younger. And from the time I was old enough to notice things, I noticed that the attention in our house did not get distributed evenly. Liam was the golden boy. Hockey, obviously. This is Saskatchewan, so that probably goes without saying, but also just generally the child my parents planned their lives around. My mom drove him to practice at 5:30 in the morning 3 times a week. My dad coached his team for 7 years. When Liam graduated high school, they threw a party at the Legion Hall with a DJ and a catered spread. I have pictures of it. Long tables with white tablecloths. My mom in a dress she bought specifically for the occasion. My dad giving a toast with actual notes written on an index card. When I graduated 2 years later, we had cake at the kitchen table. My mom made it herself, which was a nice gesture, except she made it lemon, and I have been allergic to citrus since I was 9 years old. She forgot. Or maybe she didn't forget. I'm not sure which version hurts more. I don't want to make Brooke sound like she had it easy either because she didn't, but her situation was different. She was the baby. She got softness. She got the version of my parents that had gotten tired of fighting about every little thing. By the time she was a teenager, they had stopped having rules. She came home at 2 in the morning, and nobody asked where she'd been. I had a 10 o'clock curfew until I left for university. I went to Carleton. I chose it partly because it had a good journalism program and partly because it was in Ottawa, which is about as far from Regina as you can get while still being in the same country. I applied for every scholarship I could find. I worked 20 hours a week at a coffee shop near campus. I took out student loans. My parents contributed exactly nothing. Not because they didn't have money. My dad works in oil and gas procurement. He does fine. But because they said university was my choice and they weren't going to fund my choices. I remember asking my mom the summer before I left whether there was any possibility of some help, even a little, even just for books. She said they had already committed their savings to Liam's business. He was opening a second location of his equipment rental company. She said it like that was a completely reasonable explanation. Like, of course, the family savings go to Liam's business expansion. Where else would they go? I said okay and I hung up and I cried in my car for about 40 minutes. And then I drove to my shift at the coffee shop. I want to be clear that I am not saying my parents were monsters. They are complicated people who made a consistent choice, over and over, for about 30 years, to prioritize one child over the others. That doesn't make them evil. It makes them human in a way that is genuinely hard to look at because it means they knew what they were doing and they did it anyway. I graduated in 4 years. Debt, exhaustion, part-time jobs the entire way through, but I did it. My parents did not come to convocation. My dad said he had a work thing he couldn't reschedule. My mom said the flights were expensive. I walked across the stage and my roommate's family cheered for me because she had told them about my situation, and her mother hugged me afterward and said she was proud of me, and I almost fell apart right there in the parking lot. Then came the phone call, about a week after I started my first real job at a small media company. My mom called and said she and my dad had been thinking, and since I was working now, it would really help them if I could send something home each month. She said $400. She said it like it was nothing. like it was a normal thing to ask your child who just graduated with $43,000 in student debt and was earning $38,000 a year before taxes. I said yes. I said yes because I didn't know how not to. I said yes because I had spent my entire life trying to be the easy one, the low-maintenance one, the one who didn't cause problems, and saying no felt like breaking a rule I had never agreed to but had somehow always followed. So every first of the month, $400 left my account and went to my parents. For 3 years. I met my husband at a work event when I was 27. He's an engineer. He's calm in a way I am not. Steady in a way that took me a long time to trust because I kept waiting for the version of him that would tell me I was too much or not enough. That version never showed up. He listened to me talk about my family and he never once told me I was overreacting. He just asked quiet questions. Why do you send them the money? Have you ever told them how the convocation felt? Do they know about the loans? The answers were, I don't know. No, and probably not specifically. We got engaged in February 2 years ago. I was so happy. Genuinely, uncomplicated happy, which is not an emotion I had a lot of experience with. We set the date for the following October and started planning almost immediately. My parents were invited. Of course they were invited. I called my mom and told her the date and she said, "That's wonderful," and she sounded like she meant it. For a while I let myself believe that this would be the thing that finally made us close. The wedding. My wedding. Surely this was the kind of event they would show up for. I should have known better. I really should have known better. In August, my brother Liam's wife organized a surprise renovation reveal at their house in Saskatoon. They had redone their entire main floor and she wanted the family together to see it. My parents drove 11 hours to be there. 11 hours and they stayed 4 days. I know this because Liam posted about it on Facebook and tagged everyone except me, and a mutual cousin sent me the link. I didn't say anything at the time. I filed it away in that place where I keep all the things I'm not ready to look at yet. 2 weeks before the wedding, my mom called. She said she had to talk to me about something. She said they weren't going to be able to make it to the wedding. The drive from Regina to Ottawa is about 37 hours. She said they had thought about flying, but the flights were too expensive that close to the date, and they didn't want to do such a long drive at their age. She said she hoped I understood. I was quiet for a long time. She said, "Petra, you know we love you." I said, "I know," and I hung up. I sat on my kitchen floor for a while, not crying actually, just sitting. My husband found me there about 20 minutes later and he sat down next to me and didn't say anything, just put his hand over mine and we sat there together on the tile floor until I was ready to get up. I called my sister Brooke that night. She knew about the wedding. She had told me 2 months earlier that she was coming, that she was excited, that she had already bought a dress. When I told her what my parents had said, she went quiet. I asked her if she was still coming. She said she couldn't. She said she didn't want to upset our parents by coming when they weren't there. She said it would put her in the middle. I said, "My wedding is not the middle of something." She didn't have an answer for that. We said goodbye and I didn't hear from her again until Christmas. My father-in-law walked me down the aisle. He had offered, quietly, weeks before. In that way he has of making things easier without making a big deal of it. He just said, "If you want someone there, I'm there." That was it. No ceremony around it, no expectation of gratitude. Just available. Our wedding was genuinely beautiful. We got married at a small venue near the Rideau River, 32 guests. The leaves were at peak color, which in Ottawa in October is something I can't adequately describe to you. You would just have to see it. My best friend did a reading. My husband cried a little when I came in, which made me cry, and then everyone laughed, and it was exactly the kind of wedding I had always wanted. But there were 2 empty seats in the front row. I had put my parents' names on the place cards myself. I thought about removing them the morning of, and then I decided to leave them. I don't know why exactly. Maybe I wanted them there even as placeholders. Maybe I wanted everyone to see. 3 weeks later, my dad showed up at my office. I work in a converted building near Bank Street. Open concept newsroom kind of energy. Lots of glass. I looked up from my desk, and he was just standing at the reception area in his coat, holding a folder, and my first thought was that something had happened to my mom. But nothing had happened to my mom. He was there because he wanted to talk to me about the trust. The trust. Right. Here's the thing about my grandmother on my dad's side, his mother, who passed away when I was 23. She had worked her entire adult life. She had managed her money carefully, and when she died, she left a modest but real estate portfolio, split between her two children, my dad and my Aunt Gwen. My grandmother had also left a separate fund in her will, specifically designated for her grandchildren's futures. She had written it herself by hand in the addendum for education, for homes, for whatever helps them stand on their own feet. My dad was the executor. He had been managing that fund for 8 years. I had never been told it existed. I found that out sitting across from my dad in a small meeting room at my office with my colleague pretending to be very busy on the other side of the glass wall. My dad slid the folder across the table and explained that the fund had been generating returns for several years, invested in a mix of GICs and a balanced mutual fund portfolio. He said the total across all 3 grandchildren was significant. I asked him why he was telling me now. He said they had some unexpected expenses. He said they might need to draw from the fund, and as executor, he needed signatures from the adult beneficiaries to restructure the account. He needed my signature. I looked at the folder. I looked at my dad. I asked him what the unexpected expenses were. He said the renovation at Liam's place had gone over budget, and they had put some of the cost on their line of credit, and things had gotten a bit out of hand. I looked at him for a long time. My grandmother had left money for her grandchildren to stand on their own feet. My dad had managed it for 8 years without telling me it existed, and now he was sitting in my office asking me to sign away part of it to cover a renovation at my brother's house. I said I needed some time to review the documents. He said, of course, take your time. He left. I sat in that meeting room for about 10 minutes after he walked out. Then I texted my husband, call me when you can, something's happened. And then I called a lawyer. I had a friend from Carleton who had gone into estate law. Her name is Fiona, and she is the most methodical person I have ever met, which is exactly what you want in a lawyer and in a person you are asking to look at documents that your father brought to your office without warning. She reviewed everything within 48 hours. She called me on a Thursday evening, and she talked for about 20 minutes, and here is what she told me. The fund was real. My grandmother had set it up correctly. The terms were legitimate, and as a named beneficiary, I had full rights to request a detailed accounting of every transaction made since the estate was settled. I had the right to request that. I had the right to know. Fiona also told me, gently, that the accounting my dad had provided in those documents did not reflect returns consistent with the portfolio he described. There were disbursements, multiple disbursements, over several years listed under vague descriptions. I requested the full accounting. It came 2 weeks later. I sat at my kitchen table with Fiona on speakerphone while my husband sat across from me and we went through it page by page. My share of the fund, based on my grandmother's original designation, should have been in the range of $60,000 to $65,000. What remained was $22,000. The difference had been moved over 8 years in amounts ranging from $3,000 to $12,000, described as administrative costs and management fees, and twice simply as family expenses. Fiona said I had options. I could pursue it formally, which would be expensive and slow. Or, she said, I could send a letter through her requesting immediate release of my remaining balance to an account in my name, and make it very clear in that letter that I was aware of the full accounting and that further legal action was a possibility I was actively considering. I said, send the letter. The money was in my account in 11 days. I want to tell you what I did with it because this part matters to me. First, I paid off the remainder of my student loans. $12,000? Gone. The notification from the National Student Loan Service Center sat in my phone like a door closing on a room I had lived in for 9 years. Second, my husband and I put $15,000 toward the down payment on a condo. We had been saving, but Ottawa is Ottawa, and this moved our timeline up by almost 2 years. We have a place now with a second bedroom and a view of the canal, and I think about my grandmother every time I stand at that window. Third, I stopped the monthly transfer to my parents. I sent my mom a short email. I said I was redirecting my finances and the transfers would stop as of that month. I did not explain further. She called twice. I didn't answer. She sent a message through Brooke asking if everything was okay. Brooke texted me, which was more contact than I'd had from her since I said my wedding is not the middle of something. I replied to Brooke, "Everything is fine. I've just stopped sending money I can't afford to people who didn't come to my wedding." And fourth, and this one was my husband's idea actually, which is one of the many reasons I married him. We donated $5,000 to a bursary fund at Carleton for first-generation university students. Students who got there on their own, without a family financial net, who are working their way through the way I worked, my way through. It's not a scholarship. It doesn't require a GPA cutoff. It just requires demonstrated financial need and a letter explaining why they chose to pursue higher education. I've read 3 of those letters so far through the program coordinator, and I am not going to tell you I didn't cry because that would be a lie. My dad called me once after the money transferred. He said he was disappointed in how I had handled things. He said family doesn't go to lawyers over family matters. He said my grandmother would have wanted the money to support the whole family. I said, "She wrote that it was for us to stand on our own feet." I stood. He didn't say anything after that. We haven't spoken since. My mom sent me a card at Christmas. A regular Hallmark card, the kind with a snowy scene on the front and a pre-printed message inside. She signed it "Love, Mom and Dad," and wrote nothing else. I put it on the counter and looked at it for a few days, and then I recycled it. Liam has never acknowledged any of this. He doesn't know the specifics, I think, or maybe he does and has decided it's not his problem. That tracks. Brooke texted me in January to say she missed me. I think she means it. I haven't figured out what to do with that yet. What I know is this. My grandmother left something for me. She thought about me, specifically, and she wrote it down, and she wanted me to have a foundation. My dad held that for 8 years and chipped away at it and then walked into my office and asked me to help him chip away at it some more. And I almost let him, because that is what I had been trained to do my whole life. Make it easy for them, take up less space, ask for less, forgive faster. But I had a husband who sat on the kitchen floor with me, and a lawyer who answered her phone on a Thursday night, and a grandmother who, even from wherever she is now, found a way to put something solid under my feet. The seats at my wedding were empty. That hurt in a way I'm still not fully done feeling. But I stood up anyway, and it turns out I've been doing that my whole life. I keep thinking about the word executor. My dad was the executor of my grandmother's estate. He held that role for 8 years. He held money that she had set aside specifically so her grandchildren could stand on their own feet, and he chipped away at it, quietly, in amounts small enough that nobody would ask questions, and then he walked into my office and asked me to help him finish the job. I don't think he saw himself as someone doing something wrong. That's the part I've had to sit with. He probably told himself it was all family money anyway, that it would sort itself out, that Liam needed it more right now. That's how these things work. You don't have to be a cruel person to consistently choose one child over another. You just have to stop paying attention to what that choice costs. What I've learned, not from a book, not from a therapist, though therapy helped, is that there are really only 3 things that carry you through something like this. The first is knowing what's actually right, not just what keeps the peace. For most of my life, I confused those 2 things. I thought being easy to deal with was the same as being a good daughter. It isn't. Being good means being honest, even when honesty is inconvenient, even when it ends a phone call early or means sitting on a kitchen floor trying to figure out how to feel. The second thing is using your head. When my dad slid that folder across the table, my instinct was the same instinct I'd had my whole life. Say yes, make it simple, don't cause a scene. But I had learned enough by then to pause, to say I need time to review this, to call Fiona, to actually read what I was being asked to sign. That pause, that one choice to stop and think instead of just comply, is what changed everything. My grandmother's money wasn't gone because my dad was a villain. It was going to be gone because I had been trained not to ask questions. I started asking questions. And the third thing is just not quitting. I worked 20 hours a week through university. I graduated with $43,000 in debt and nobody in my corner financially. I built something anyway. Not because I'm exceptional. I'm not. But because I just kept going when stopping would have been easier. That's not a personality trait you're born with. It's a muscle. You build it by doing the next hard thing, and then the next one, and eventually you look back and realize the distance you've covered. Petra didn't get justice because the universe decided to balance the scales. She got it because she paused. She called a lawyer, and she asked to see the full accounting. That's it. That's the whole mechanism. The outcome followed from the action. The seats at my wedding were empty. My father-in-law walked me down the aisle and didn't make a big thing of it. Just showed up, which is all any of us really need from the people in our lives. My grandmother left me something to stand on. I'm standing on it now. I think about her sometimes when I'm at the window looking out at the canal. She never met my husband. She never saw the condo. But she wrote my name into a document by hand and said, "This one too. This one gets something." That meant everything. It still does.